my name is Olivia Snyder. I'm a potter, painter, and maker. What's going on today? So, I'm primarily a clay artist. I love getting my hands dirty in order to create art. Thing is, this seems pretty obvious. Clay is essentially mud, so in order to love what I do, I must love making a mess. I do, but I also appreciate the cleanliness of computerized illustration and graphic design. Both. You can love both. Making art just for fun is one of those crucial things that all creatives should embark upon. It's a way for your brain to relax and explore possibilities. Pick a paint color, don't think. Red, who cares what shade? Just grab the bottle and use it. Put it on the paper, with your finger, with a brush, don't think. Just do it. When you allow yourself not to think, to just make, your brain isn't constrained by making sure you've done, quote, the right thing. Did you pick the wrong shade of red? Maybe. Does it matter? No. In this video, I'm playing with a gel printing pad. I've a bunch of sacred geometry graphics I used for other types of art, in my oracle deck, my tarot deck, and illustrations for one. So, the images that I'm working with may look heavily structured in some areas, but they were constructed for a different purpose. For play, I'm just isolating them and printing them out. Not really much thought required. Printing on a gel pad like this is originally known as a hectograph or a jellygraph, which sounds adorable to me, thus I shall refer to it as that from here on. Let me put on my old lady glasses and reminisce of a time before we had fancy pants Xerox machines or copiers. No, I'm just kidding. I remember getting some purple prints at school when I was really young, but I was pretty firmly in the copy machine era. Anyway, before photocopiers, there were several ways to make copies of important documents. The Jellygraph was one of them. An original document was made with special ink, then slapped on the gel pad. The ink transferred to the pad, then blank sheets of paper pressed onto the pad to make copies. I'll put a link with a cool explanation of Jellygraph printing in the description. Some genius decided to revive Jellygraphs for artistic purposes, and wham bam, thank you ma'am, you can buy them at your local big box craft store. I was intrigued by the idea of making monoprints on a squishy surface. I've a heavy printmaking background, and I've only ever made monoprints with smelly oil inks on acrylic sheets. The idea of repetition is one of the attractors for printmaking in my mind, so I never really explored monoprinting much. I've also long ago eliminated oil paints from my supply stash. They require what I call headache in a can in order to clean up and dilute. While the results are stunning, oil paints aren't for me. As an aside, it's recommended not to use oil-based materials on commercial jelly pads. They're mineral oil-based materials, and using oil paints on them can cause them to break down quickly. So, I have a vast supply of cheap craft store paints and a desire to make a mess and slap some paint down. Jellygraphs are the perfect distraction from, quote, planned art. Some of my jellygraphs didn't turn out great. I wanted to use my shimmery pearl paper. The thin acrylic transfers didn't want to stick to my shimmery pearl paper. I wanted to be conservative in my paint use. The transfer barely showed up. I wanted to blend some colors. They looked horrible when blended. Experimenting is how you learn. It keeps you humble. I love how this whole process really appealed to my touchy-feely side. I don't want to measure exact amounts of medium. I just want to squirt it on the surface and guesstimate. Ugh, that's too much. Ugh, that was too little. Ugh, I've got it just right. Again, I'm having fun, but I'm also learning. This isn't a tutorial, but rather an encouragement. This isn't my first time playing with a jelly pad. The first time I tried image transfer using a laser print, it failed miserably. I had 3 kinds of black paint on hand, and none of them yielded the results that I wanted. Ideally, you roll on a layer of black, you slap on the toner-based copy, and you peel it off. The toner repels the paint, and so it stays on the jelly, while the rest of the paper takes the paint off of the pad. It's truly a touchy-feely process. I determined that using a higher pigment black would help, and it did. Various online sources indicated that running your print through 2 or 3 times would accumulate enough toner on the paper to actually repel the paint. It did. But figuring out exactly how much paint to roll on the pad, that was a trick. Personally, I use 2 pea-sized blorps. Sometimes my peas aren't big enough. Sometimes they're too much. I have to listen to the kissy sound that the ink makes to know if I did it correctly. Then you have to slap on that toner print immediately. Do not run to the other side of the room, the paint will dry. This is the most amount of planning a Jellygraph requires. If you're using materials to transfer, have them ready. It is a race against drying paint. Monoprinting requires working with layers of paint in reverse. The top layer must be done first, then you work your way towards the bottom layer. It's similar to painting on a window from inside of a building when you want your artwork to be viewed from outside the establishment. In my experience, most drawings and paintings, whether digital or traditional, are completed from the bottom up. Artists block in colors, values, and so forth, and top everything off with line art. Jellygraph monoprints are a good exercise in A, thinking in reverse, B, experiencing the inability to correct mistakes. Acrylic paints, especially cheap ones, dry fast. You have to work fast. There's no time to reflect on a brushstroke being too thick or too thin. It just is. Living with an artistic decision you dislike does 2 things. 1, you learn to love the mistake, or 2, reinforce how to avoid making mistakes in the first place. Living with an artistic decision you dislike does 2 things. 1, you learn to love the mistake, or 2, you reinforce how to avoid making the mistake in the first place. This whole endeavor is a way to build creativity. Creativity isn't a gift people are born with. It's a skill strengthened by exercise. Jellygraphs happen to be a fun way to build strength. There's no undo button. Materials don't always cooperate, and it invites experimenting. As a matter of fact, you can make your own Jellygraph at home, which invites all manner of experimentation. But that's for another video. In the immortal words of Ms. Frizzle, take chances, make mistakes, and get messy! As always, links to my website and resources are in the description, and I hope you have a magical day.